That's how, so that's how, I didn't know that's how dolphins travel that quickly. You said it's a shedding of,
Yeah, they basically have extreme dandruff,
yeah.
and and that helps break up some of the what's the word I'm looking for? The vortex from the force of the water.
That's cool.
Hitting them. And one of something that was very fun in reading one of your JLA stories, you had the Flash and well, the whole JLA really, but the panel showed Flash and Plastic Man going down into water, and they're like, "Oh, can't breathe. What are we doing here?" So it's just, and I thought this was really interesting that you have Aquaman in his world, and you bring the other Justice League people there, and they can't function normally.
No, they can't. I mean, this is, it's not only is it a world where the pressure is so insane that it would crumple a battleship if it were that deep, but your entire sense of balance is thrown off because there's no, we automatically tune to the sun and the sky. Even on a cloudy day, we and birds and all above land creatures take our cues from that in terms of where we are. So if you're that deep underwater, you're, which way is up, which way is down, you get discombobulated by that. Atlantis is not much help because Atlantis, there's no stairs in Atlantis. There's no doorways. Why would there be? They can swim.
There shouldn't be any roads either.
There shouldn't be any roads either. Why would exactly? Why would? I know. So yeah.
You're ruining art. What became of fantasy?
I know. I've ruined it. So.
I drew a picture recently of Aquaman's out in the desert, and of course that's not his, his medium. And he's with Metamorpho, so Metamorpho turned his arm into a shower, and he showered
that's
down
great.
on Aquaman.
That's great.
So that's my, my tribute to reality.
That's awesome. To jump from Aquaman to another character, the Flash.
Yeah.
I'll open up again. Ramona, your experience with drawing the Flash and then your experience with
I never
writing.
drew the Flash.
Well, you drew some
A little bit.
the
Here's
Super Friends.
Super Friends you draw a couple times, but not at great length. Yeah. And with Flash, remember that suspension of disbelief I was talking about? I mean, there's rules to running, and there's rules to energy conservation. You can't possibly put out that much energy, and I did the research. You'd have to eat something like 1,300 pizza pies a day just to be able to do the basic stuff that Flash does because of the caloric input and how much energy you're putting out. So I know that it's kind of fun to have Flash eat a lot because he uses a lot of energy, but there's no way to account for that. So we built, basically what we built was something that, because I never came up with a better name for it, and I wish I had, something called the Speed Force, which is one of those names that comes to you because the FedEx guy is standing on your front porch saying, "I need the script." The Speed Force is that thing that I basically said it's sort of an energy construct that exists beyond the speed of light. Again, this is not science at all. This is making stuff up, and it is something from which all the speedsters draw their energy, so that accounts for the fact that they have friction-proof auras that keep them from burning up as they travel through the air, and it accounts for the reason that they don't fly off into space the moment they hit 7 miles a second, which is escape velocity, and allows them to do their super speed stunts.
Yeah. I mean, yes. As a science person, I look at the Speed Force and I'm like, how can I even try to?
Again, that's how can Superman pick up a building by the corner? You can't. You kind of just roll your eyes and go, all right, sign comics, everybody.
You have to just believe.
Exactly. Suspension of disbelief. Exactly. Verisimilitude.
I remember, I don't remember, but I've read that when Superman first came out, they tried to explain to the audience how he got his superpowers, and they compared him to the distance a beetle or something can jump, times its body, and so a grasshopper was it,
But at the same time, when he first came in, this is true, when they first came out, the publisher, who was Harry Donenfeld, I guess at the time, looked at that first cover of Superman smashing a car across a rock and said, this will never sell. No one can do that. That's absurd and ridiculous, and no kid will buy into that, which is incredibly short-sighted. But yeah, suspension of disbelief.
Another in that image with the grasshopper, they also linked it to an ant being able to lift. Its weight.
But that's so limiting for Superman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
From what he turned into, yes.
Yeah.
It's very limiting.
I mean, in a sense, you're limiting the powers of these characters by trying to explain them.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Again, at the end of the day, nobody cares. Nobody cares whether, again, like my favorite example is always Superman lifting a stadium with one hand or whatever, and it doesn't collapse under its own weight. I don't care. I don't care. What I care about is Superman can fly through the air. That's the part of Superman that we all identify. You ask any 10 people at random on the street, tell me something about Superman, they'll tell you he can fly.
Yeah.
And that's the coolest thing about Superman, and all the other stuff is just window dressing. It's fun to play with the science of it and stuff, and it's fun to have those. But at the end of the day, that's what counts. Yeah.
But also these fantastical characters help science envision what could be possible.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And so a great example of that is of course Star Trek. We have cell phones. That was their communication device in Star Trek.
Right.
That's a direct link there. So.
We're coming up to tricorders. We're coming up to medical scanning devices that are able to tell you stuff. Yeah, right. I mean already we have machines that can sniff out cancer, just as using the same sort of genomes that dogs use. Because a lot of people, diabetics, dolphins too, exactly. Diabetics have rescue dogs that are specifically trained to sniff out when your body sugar goes up and down and stuff. So we're very close, and we can emulate that now in machine form.
Right. And another thing is, we have 3D printers.
Yes,
and
replicators.
Yeah. Which pretty soon we can just make an orange from a 3D printer and eat it.
Yeah.
Well, not pretty soon, but
So I would be willing to bet sooner. I would be willing to bet we'll all still be alive in this room when we can create food.
Yeah.
With machines. Real food. We're very close now. People are creating body parts. People are creating organic things. And again, it's the next step will be organs. The next step will be creating kidneys. Kidneys will probably be the next thing.
Right.
We'll be able to create through machine that allow people to function. So food is the next step up. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because once I have a machine that makes Skittles, nobody's ever saw it. I never have to leave the house again.
You just have to get a refill of all the elements there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So with that link into science, I want to share. Ramona contributed a cover to Dignifying Science, which was written by Jim Monteviani, which is an awesome book. What did you think about doing the cover for that and the book itself?
It was a long time ago. I'm really not the person to be on this panel. I don't remember very much. I remember doing that cover and struggling with Hedy Lamar's face. I mean, for me,
that's a good story. There you go.
Drawing is a struggle.
Yeah.
It's just, and I wasn't quite sure exactly what I was doing. I know I had to have some flowers. These are just snatchy memories that I have of doing that cover. But I know that he was a very serious guy and was doing some really interesting books. And he did an Oz book, didn't he? And fairy tales, or was it The Wizard of Oz?
I think so.
I think he did. Yeah, he did some really interesting things. But I'm afraid I can't contribute anything very helpful to this. I just don't remember well doing that cover.
Is everybody enjoying having Ramona on the
Yeah.
panel? So knock it off. You're doing great.
Drawers are dumb.
thank you for drawing that cover and contributing to well this book specifically, which was contributing women in science. They're
Yeah.
the stories of women in science, which is fantastic and not talked about enough.
Right.
And there's another big superhero of mine, an independent character that you wrote one issue of, that sort of blows my mind in terms of his powers, and that is Dr. Solar.
Dr. Solar. The God machine, that guy.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I mean, and I only tinkered a little bit. What was your experience with this? When did you discover the character?
I discovered the character probably about 5 years ago. I read Jim Shooter's Dark Horse run first, and it really captured my imagination in mixing science and comics. I'm like, this guy can do anything. It's directly related to just subatomic particles and just being able to manipulate them. Actually, beyond that, because he is basically E equals mc squared. He can turn his energy into mass and mass into energy. So it's just fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes. So.
I got nothing.
What do you think of Kirby? Do you think that his stuff is based on science, or an interest in science, or an interest in Tantra? I mean, it seems to me that the kind of transformation that his characters go through have something to do with the process of Tantric yoga. They start out being zapped by something,
Yeah.
which in Tantra would be the passion of love, or in alchemy would be the heat of the fire, when those two things sort of work together. And it seems to me that all of these superheroes most of them now gain their powers through some sort of accident or some kind of radiation, explosion that then transforms them and gives them these superpowers. So it's not a scientific thing per se, it's more of I guess you'd say Tantra is a spiritual practice, very, very just, rigid discipline. And I just wonder what you think about that.
I had actually never thought about it in those terms. I just strictly thought about it in okay, you took something he made a story that, okay, how can I look at this through the lens of science? I never thought about looking at it through the lens
He's got all
of
these energy
human.
things going around, in the air all the time. I mean, I think he's very tuned into energy, certainly.
Oh,
Kirk.
yes,
yeah,
That's
absolutely.
for him is the big
Every
thing.
panel was just
Yeah.
very
Yeah,
energetic.
Yeah, and I think, again, didn't care about the reality of the science as much as just the feeling. And it was
Yeah.
so much of his stuff was, even though it was all about energy and radiation and so forth, it was still about energy. It was still about human passions and human emotions and stuff. So that's a really good observation.
And it's interesting because in Tantra, the theory is that once they've achieved the breakthrough, they have superpowers. They can teleport, they can fly. I mean, it's very, very similar. It might be interesting for some of you to, investigate that. But I think who does the Promethea books? That's Tantra per se.
Yeah, Alan Moore and J.G. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very much so.
And how else? I don't think science as such can explain superpowers.
No.
And I think it's fantasy, either fantasy or it's some product of mind.
So with the Tantra, is it that they just reach a certain point in their practice and in their mind that it just releases these powers?
It's a complicated physical, mental process, both. It takes years of discipline. And nobody really has ever seen a yoga fly, and yet there's been so many convincing, like shamans, the same thing as shamanism. They're very close, So I always think of this as a form of shamanism. But for kids, they don't care. It just happens. It's fine, And basically, that's what comics are for, kids.
Yes.
You people should
Well, there's like 15 minutes left, So maybe we should open it up to questions to the crowd. You guys have questions for Janice?
Miss Ramona, did your brother ever figure out you were writing about him?
He's dead. Long, he died before I did Java. No, I would have told him that.
Yes, sir.
What was the best use of science in a comic book story or battle that you've ever written or seen?
Or seen? That's a really good question.
You did do the shield.
I do Shield, but you know, all right, no, but my answer is the Metal Men. The answer is the creation of the Metal Men. The Metal Men, for those who don't know, it was a weekend assignment. It was suddenly there was a hole in the schedule at DC Comics, it's 1963, and the writer / editor Robert Kanigher was a character in and of his own right. He and his artists had a weekend and a couple of days to come up with a brand new character, brand new something from scratch, didn't care what. Kanigher grabbed the chemistry textbook from his desk and he came up with this concept of 6 robots, each of them made from a different element, and each of them, their personalities sort of informed by that. Mercury was the hothead, because you find Mercury's in thermometers. Obviously, Iron was sort of the stalwart, you know, sort of humble go-to, you know, solid everyman in the team, and so forth and so on. And I learned so much about science from reading those comics because it was, yes, it was fantasy, but still each robot's abilities were very, very in tune with what those elements could do, and they were confined by what gold was incredibly ductile and could spread itself very thin, so that was the element we used in the stories, or you know, things like that. That I thought was the best use of science I've ever seen because it was very grounded in science. It was a really perfect blend of fantasy, so you didn't feel like the science was just too much like you being schooled, and at the same time the science was very grounded, very real.
I have one question. It has to do with Dr. Solo. Is he similar to Dr. Manhattan, or are they like different?
He was a spin-off. Wasn't he?
Or Dr. Solar?
Dr. Solar was the original character.
No, you're thinking of Captain Atom. Was actually the inspiration for Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's all right, but no. With Dr. Solar, I didn't mean to hijack the panel. I'm sorry. And Dr. Solar actually came first.
Okay.
But in the original comics, he was just another scientist hit with radiation, and he
Okay.
could just kind of do whatever the plotter needed him to do. It was only after Dr. Manhattan hit with Watchmen and stuff that the writers who rebooted and rethought Dr. Solar thought, ooh, there's some mileage in here. Dr. Manhattan lasted for 12 issues and that universe went away.
Right.
What can we do to sort of do more stories along those lines?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
You talked about the characters you did like writing the science for.
Yeah.
Is there anyone that either guest starred in one of your comics, or you just had no idea what to do with, or you just hated when they appeared?
And the science in particular, I'm trying to think, who makes my head melt when it comes to science? Because the fun part is always taking the characters, and even the ones that don't seem to make any sense on the surface of them, and try to find something. It was never the science characters that bothered me. I could always logic the science. It was always characters like Thor and Wonder Woman, who I like as characters, but I can't wrap my head around those characters to save my life because it's all fantasy. It's all, they can do anything. There's no real,
Superior.
yeah, there's no real sort of scientific limits to their powers, and I don't know, this is why you see very few Thor or Wonder Woman guest appearances in my comics, so.
Yeah, I mean they're gods basically. So
Yeah.
how can you that the premise of that in itself is opposite of science.
Yeah.
So it's hard to work with.
There's a powerful core there, yeah.
Yeah, there really is. And again, I would never in any way disparage or diminish those characters. It's just saying, not to my taste. So, yes, sir.
I was going to say, what hero or supervillain do you think could be like closest to reality? Like aside from like Punisher or Bruce Wayne, they got technically and everything like that. But any superhero, supervillain with an actual power, who would be closest to it?
Like, who's the closest to, like, who in the next 100 years could we conceivably see?
Pace Pop Pete.
Stick
Iron Man, I mean, that's, you know, Elon Musk is Tony Stark, first off.
That's why I said those folks aside, like, exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
Those
they have
aside.
tech toys, so.
Yeah, so we're talking about like people, that's a very good question. What have we seen in terms of biological advancements recently that,
Cyborg. I mean, people have appendages, you know, that are electronic that work. I'm trying to think of.
cyborg is a good example, does that count?
Stop worrying that long.
Yeah. Deathlock, yeah, that's, I went someplace happy, you went someplace dark.
I have a question. What scientific character in the comic books that you relate to, that you see yourself as? If you had to say, yeah, that's me.
Oh, that's a good question. Again, as ridiculous as it sounds, The Flash, because I can't do any of that stuff, but I'm impatient and I want to get my homework done instantly, and I want to experience all of life, and I constantly feel, I wrote a line in Flash earlier where, like early on, the exact line, it was, time is the enemy of all living things. And that's how I feel a lot of times. Like, that time is my enemy. Like, I just want to explore things. I want to travel more. I want to meet more people. Not you, but I want to get out and experience all the world has. And sadly, I don't mean to drag the room down, but the older you get, the more you sort of hear the ticking of the clock, and like, I'm running out of time to do this stuff. So that's Aries, actually. Yeah. What about you? Are there any superheroes you ever fantasized about being besides
Sapphire.
Sapphire? Yeah, Sapphire. There you go.
I don't know. No, I haven't. Really.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
Have you ever had to try to explain to kids or to an audience about how the science works with some of the superhero outfits, why they're all still there at the end?
And oddly enough, those clothes still stay the same. I'm trying to think. We did to some degree with Fantastic Four. It was Jack Kirby and Stan Lee who came up with the idea of unstable molecules, which is a perfect sort of whimsical suspension of disbelief blanket term for any clothes that you want to stay the same.
That term drives me nuts.
Yeah. Your shirt, you burst into flame, but your shirt's still there. Unstable molecules. You shrank to a microscopic size, but your clothes still fit. Unstable molecules.
Same way they would have reacted.
Yeah.
As a footnote to that.
Yes.
Again, going back to, I had the handbook of the Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
And even back into the 70s when I was a kid, someone asked the question, how does the Hulk's pants stay on?
Yeah.
And they figured in the universe,
Yeah.
the gamma radiation made the purple pants unstable molecules.
Sure. Why not?
Otherwise, he would do re-entry after battling the leader, and he'd be naked. And the
Right.
comic those wouldn't have that.
Although again, we're in that weird tightrope between I want to know and I just want to suspend my disbelief.
Yes.
Yeah. Time for like one or two more if you got anything. Yes, sir.
In terms of both writing and drawing, how do you guys handle like a really mismatched scale of power? Like Superman and Spider-Man, everyone wants them to team up because they're Marvel and DC's flagship, but I always thought it's kind of pointless because Superman lifts buildings and Spider-Man, can lift a car. It just seems weird. How do you guys reconcile that?
How would you do it?
Were you ever called upon to do a story where you just had mismatched characters in terms of like their power levels or the villains they fought were ridiculously powered or unpowered? I mean, did you?
You fake it.
You fake it. There you go. Fake it. There you go.
No, seriously, sometimes you just have to because it's so impossible, or the action itself is so impossible that you just have to find a way. They're doing it in movies all the time. I don't know if you noticed it, but the special effects, you don't really see what's happening, but suddenly, somebody's been hit and is knocked unconscious, and you don't know how it happened because the person was tied up before. Just sort of, it's a sleight of hand kind of thing. That's the only way I can explain it. You have to learn to do that.
I think that says gobs. Yes. Well, two more real quick, right? We gotta blow out. So, because the next panel's coming in, we just don't want to be rude to them.
In the movie, Captain America's shield supposedly can, I don't know,
resist all force.
Yeah.
How does it bounce?
It's not made, he was talking about how if Captain America's shield is so resilient, how does it bounce? It's not made of vibranium. That's the mistake they keep saying in the movies that they picked up from the comics. It is not made of vibranium. If it were made of vibranium, then it actually, no, it's not true. It is partly vibranium. It's not adamantium. They keep saying.
Yeah, the comic. We can talk later.
It's partly vibranium, partly a metal.
It's different in the movies than in the comics.
Yeah, that's in any adamantium in the comics, or in the movies rather. But talk about resistance. Talk about resilience. Like again, the same reason a bowling ball will still bounce if you drop it from a high enough.
Yeah, so vibranium, the metal itself, can resist the force of vibrations. So, if it's in Captain America's hand, then they hit it, it'll resist a lot of that force, and it'll just stay there. But if he's throwing it, of course, it will be able to have some force react on it, but not to the extent that something normal, I guess. So you have to suspension.
Comics.
Yeah.
It's comics.
So with him holding it, it's better.
Yeah. Actually, we only got time for one more. You.
So when you look across the comic book universe and you start seeing a lot of characters that are very similar, DC, Marvel, a lot of just characters are like, this could be that character, Hawkeye, Green Arrow, whatever.
Yeah.
And we talk about possibilities of science, possibilities of what we can do with our imagination. At what point do you reach the point of that is so ridiculous that no one is going to buy it and they can do it anyway, or have you ever reached that point and then said, nah, I can't go any further?
Ghost Rider.
Ghost Rider.
Flaming skull.
Yeah. That is tough because I can't think of concrete examples at the moment. I apologize, but I know there are times when I have read something in a scientific journal, like cutting edge stuff, and I thought to myself, that would be really cool to put in a comic, but if I did it at this stage, no one would believe me. And in fact, when I wrote I led off talking about with the quantum entanglement with Justice League, I actually wrote an essay in the back of the comic, in the letters page, so that people wouldn't think I was making stuff about a whole cloth, and it was ridiculous. I wrote an essay on the reality of it. So
I don't get this because you believe that they can fly. They can,
right, they can live underwater. They can,
I mean, where does? I don't understand how you get all tangled up in science.
Yeah, exactly. It's just suspension of disbelief.
It's just a science person that wants to rationally, come up with an explanation of everything.
Well, because sometimes you get a good story out. Sometimes in thinking about, like I said, the thing with Aquaman where he would, above ground, his voice would sound like a whisper. At least I got a fun story element out of it. It didn't feel like I was breaking the suspension of disbelief. But I see what you're saying. Yeah, you're right. If you put all that stuff under a microscope, if you start pulling on that thread on that tapestry, the whole tapestry falls apart.
If we could give these people a hand. I want to thank them by giving them a gift. It's Feynman by Jim Montaviani. So some science in comics. So this is for you. Mark, this
Thanks.
is for
I
you.
do not have this. I've been looking for this. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's very awesome.
So
Thanks, everybody. Ramona, you'll be downstairs signing at some point?
No, I won't be signing. I'll just be at a table. Then.
Be at a table.
4 6 years or something.
Or in the 400s.
it's 420.
She's at 420. I'm at 1201, which is going in. It's like the far left and stuff. But we'll be at our tables if you need anything from us, okay?
Give these people your.
Okay. Exactly. That would be vibranium. No, wasn't that bad? Because they hadn't invented that.